Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Work Item Podcast. We are at season 6 years in, and this is our second episode. And wow, what guest do we have today? Taiwo Oyeniyi from Distrobird, and you're a CTO at Distrobird at that. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I am so looking forward to learn more about what a CTO does and how to get there, because we had a lot of listeners that were asking this question. I was like, oh, I want to become a C-suite technical executive. And what a better way to learn than from somebody that actually does that. So maybe before we get into that topic, we get a little bit deeper into the background that you have. So tell us more about what you're working on and how you got there, like what steps you took to be a CTO.
So yeah, let me go way back to just how I got started here. So I got my undergrad degree in chemical engineering, and then I left. I went to work for Goldman Sachs in New York. And before I actually left undergrad, I started working on startups, on apps. I had a roommate he was in business. I was in chemical engineering, but we thought, Blackboard, which was the sort of the content or school management software, we thought it was crap, and we needed to do something better. And so we started, but we had no technical skill. So we tried to hire people, try to get people to help. It just didn't work out. And so I said, okay, you know what? Let me graduate. I mean, I'm 3 years in already. I need to finish this anyway, because my parents are going to be like, what are you doing with your life? So I finished. I went to work at Goldman just to take a break. I worked there for about 9 months, and then I left. I went back to grad school to study computer science. So I made a massive shift. And then I got an internship to work at a nonprofit in DC. That was really where I got into proper web development, because in college, they don't really teach you that. Maybe it's different now. And then from there, I finished grad school, and I went to work for the UFC for about 4 or 5 years. And then I sort of reconnected back with my old friend, and we to do this new startup called Distrobird. Essentially, the company was already running, but I joined in early on, one of the first couple of engineers, and eventually I sort of took over the core development and management role in the company. And yeah, and we're in 6 years down now.
That seems quite a journey, and it seems like you had the entrepreneurial bug from some time ago that you were kind of thinking about, like doing your own thing. Was that more of I want to say like a natural kind of innate, I want to say like instinct that I want to have my own company instead of working for somebody else? Was there a trigger to say that, no, you know what, I want to work for myself?
So I've always wanted to start a company. My dad ran his own sort of civil engineering company back home, back in Nigeria. So I'm from Nigeria. And so my plan was, you know what, I would like to do the same. But then when I was in college in undergrad, I thought, you know what, let me finish this. Let me go work at Goldman, maybe go do a master's or PhD, and then figure that out eventually. But then I had this roommate who was a lot more driven, a lot more entrepreneurial. I think that sort of rubbed off on me. And then eventually it was like, okay, dude, I'm not gonna go do a master's or PhD. I just want to start a company. So that's basically where that started from. I think I got into entrepreneurship, I think, early on because of my roommate, and yeah, and we've basically been working at that since then.
How do you overcome that maybe fear of, well, what if we do our own thing but it fails? Because as somebody that have talked to some entrepreneurs, it seems like that varies. Like some entrepreneurs are all like, dive into the deep end of the pool right away, like starting my own company, versus others that are just kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna work a little bit for some other company while I build my project on the side, because there's a bit of a fear of like, well, what if I fail and I still need an income and I need to pay my mortgage and all these kind of things. Like, what was your approach?
I think I took a sort of a balanced approach. I had those concerns. So I'm a very driven and let's just go, let's get it person. I don't have time to waste. And so early on, so like, and this was while I was in college, we started sort of thinking about building Blackboard and other kinds of applications. And so the plan was, let's go for it. But then when I graduated, I was an international student then. I had to go get a job or stay in school. So I had to go get the job. I couldn't work on the app as much as I wanted to. And I went back to grad school to study computer science. And so for me, I'd always been driven to do it. But I also understand reality of just life. I have to make money. I have to pay the bills. In my case, I had to stay in status. I had to make sure I was in the country legally. So I had to balance all those things. So in some cases, I really couldn't go as fast as I wanted to, just because there are other things I had to deal with. But my take has always been, there's just not enough time to achieve everything. And you should go for it as soon as you can. And if you have some concern or some fear, then find a mentor. Find someone that can help you, share that burden and really mentor you and help you grow or get through some of those issues or some of the mistakes they've gone through, and you don't have to deal with those things again. So for me, it's go for it. You need to go. There's just not enough time. Let's just go for it, and we figure it out as we go. I don't think my perspective is I don't think you need to go to B school or you need to go get experience somewhere. Maybe certain kinds of projects or certain kinds of entrepreneurial aspirations, maybe. But in general, you're going to learn a lot more doing it than being in a class and going through a more structured environment. That's my take. So I just believe you get on the ground and start doing it, and you can learn a lot more.
That's interesting because that is definitely one of those opinions that I think has a lot of weight behind it coming from you, because a lot of folks do think that for them to be successful as an entrepreneur, for them to be successful as somebody that starts a business, you have to go to B school, get an MBA, get some kind of, exposure to a network of folks that can help you grow. But the contact with reality feels like so much more important, because the only way to learn is to learn by doing. Like, no book is going to teach you how to actually run a business and hit the walls that you have to hit.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yep.
And so in the context of your work, you did go for chemical engineering first. So this was quite a shift, right? From a career perspective. How was that? Like, were there any second thoughts? It's like, well, am I doing the right thing?
Oh yeah, I think that decision was both the best and the worst decision I made.
Really?
It was the worst in the moment because again, I grew up in Nigeria, born and raised in Nigeria, and there's always the joke that in Nigeria there are four things you can do. There are four careers you can go. It's doctor, engineer. You can be some sort of banker or someone that works in some finance field, or you can be like a lawyer. Full stop. Anything else, your parents are going to tell you you're doing something wrong with your life. So maybe in that sense, I don't know. That's why I sort of ended up in chemical engineering. I don't know, but making that switch, I remember I went back to my alma mater for my computer science program, and they gave me a conditional admission because they said, look, you're making a switch. You've done some comp sci. I think I did like a basic comp sci class in undergrad, and said, look, this might be difficult, but you've done well in chemical engineering. We think you can do it, but this has to be conditional. So you have to get certain grades, and then we can make this a complete admission or a final admission. So I said, that's fine. And my first year in grad school, I had some of the worst grades in my entire career, in my entire education career, because I would sit in class and the professor would say, you guys did this in comp sci 201, so I'm just going to skip it. And I'm like, no, in comp sci in 201, my second year in undergrad, I was doing fluid mechanics or something else. I wasn't doing this stuff. But again, I'm just one person out of 10 people, so they're just going to move on. And so I find I had to spend a lot of time after class just studying, going on YouTube, watching MIT videos on YouTube, just trying to catch up. I had a friend then in the same program who sort of helped me, mentored me a bit. And I remember a friend of mine told me, someday you're going to wake up and everything is going to make sense. It's like, just keep going. It's like, okay, you're doing algorithms, you're doing all this stuff, data structures. It's like, I'm like, I don't understand. And it's like, just keep going. At some point, everything is going to connect and you're going to understand. So, and I think after my first year in grad school, it's sort of connected and I understand computing. Okay, now I see how all these things come together. So it was difficult, and that's why I say it's one of the worst decisions, because that first year was tough. It was very difficult for me to just keep up with class. I've never struggled in class, but I struggled in my first year. But once I got past there, it's like, okay, now I have the power. I can go build anything I want to build. So yeah, it was definitely one of the best decisions I made, but it was a tough one. And I thought, you can just stay at your cushy job at Goldman. Why leave? There were moments where I thought, your friends, are in Goldman making good money. You can probably just go back there and go make good money too, and you'll be okay. But again, I was driven to just be able to build applications myself.
That's interesting, because that's, again, the perspective that not everybody has, of that if you have a cushy position at a company like a Fortune 500 or Goldman, or any of the big companies, the concept of golden handcuffs does exist for a reason, because people get like, it's like You clock in at night, at 9, you leave at 5, you're done. With some exceptions, of course, but the gist of it is like you do your work, you come home, and you're just kind of relaxing. Starting your own business, building your own things, that work kind of never stops. You always think about the business. You always have to think about like how to evolve it, and it seems like a scary transition to make.
It is for sure. It is. It is. Yeah. One of the reasons I left Goldman so quickly was because I was trying to avoid that. Because I'd seen some, older friends, they've said, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to go work, and in 2 years or a year or two, I'll go to grad school." It's been 4 years now, and you haven't gone to grad school, and they're like, "Yeah, it's difficult." So I said, "Look, I think if I stay here longer than maybe a year or two, and I get those bonuses, I might get stuck." So that's why I spent about 9 months. I think I started in May or June, and then I left by January the next year. I was like, no, I'm not going to stay here for too long. If I do, I'll get too comfortable. So I was leaving out of my suitcase in New York because I said, look, I'm not going to settle. I got to get out of here.
This is one of those things that, again, I admire just the push and self-awareness of saying I can't stay here longer because I'll get used to it. And that requires quite a bit of that self-reflection of saying, not what I want to do long term. And so after that, you dove into more technical work. So you went to grad school, you got your computer science degree, and then you mentioned you work at a lot of kind of different positions, including the UFC.
Yes.
Walk me through kind of what led you to those kind of stair steps.
Okay, so I worked at a nonprofit. So I did an internship at a nonprofit in DC, Washington DC. It was a 3-month internship, but then my boss came and said, "Look, if you want to hang around for a couple more months, that's fine. We're not going to pay you, but you can stay." I'm like, you know what? Absolutely. I've been learning a lot. I'm going to hang around. So I stayed for a couple more months. I think almost 8, 9 months eventually, and then that's where I basically got into web development and building applications. And then when I finished grad school, I was desperate to get a job because again, I'm an international student. It's either you get a job or you stay in school. So I was looking for a job, and then I was also trying to get married. So I was super desperate. I mean, I can still remember those moments. So eventually, I just went on Craigslist and said, you know what? Any job that has computer in the name or in the description, I can probably get a work visa for it. So I started applying, and then I found a job on Craigslist that said, "Hey, come work for an entertainment or like a production company that produces fights." I didn't know anything about the UFC then. And part of the job description was, "Hey, you're going to travel to live events to operate software." So I'm like, you know what? I think I can get a visa for this. So I applied for the job on Craigslist because I remember I was online just refreshing. Once the job comes up, I just apply. And then my boss then calls me and says, "Hey, I saw your resume, pretty impressive. Maybe even I think maybe even slightly overqualified, but come in, let's talk." So I went in, and it turns out my boss actually grew up in Nigeria.
Wow.
Yeah, he
Small world.
yeah. So it's like I grew up in Nigeria in the 1980s, and hey, so that kind of helped us, converse nicely, easily. And so he then said, "Look, you have a master's in computer science. This job actually doesn't require that. You're going to have to travel for UFC events, and part of your job is to operate software we build." So I said, "That's fine. But we were going to hire a software developer after we filled this role. So are you fine doing both jobs?" I'm like, you know what? That's the dream. Absolutely. So that's how I started writing software for the UFC, but also traveling to UFC events. I think 70-80% of UFC events that were done, I would be at those events around the world for about 4 or 5 years.
That's for a lot of folks that would be like the dream job, right?
Yeah, it was traveling was great. I love traveling, so that was great.
And then at some point, you did even leave that job to pursue Distrobird.
Yes.
What was the appeal then? Your entrepreneurial fire got rekindled at some point.
Yeah. So what happened was, so my friend, so we're working on something on the side, and in 2018, it's like, hey, you know what? I just need more developer focus. I need more, product development, and I have the money. Can you join me? And so I'm like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Let's do this again. So I took the leap. I left the UFC. That was difficult for me to do, honestly, because it was such a, my boss then and the team I worked for were like a family, and so it was very difficult to leave. But I said, no, you know what, I got to go. I'm reconnecting with an old friend. So I basically left the UFC and then joined Distrobird. And then I think at that time it had an SMS focused platform. But the goal was, okay, we want to retool to beyond SMS. We want to add other channels, email, voice, and things like that into the platform. So I said, okay, no, yeah, let's do it. So I came in at the time, I think there were two engineers out of Nepal. So I came in as a third engineer and basically took over the engineering function of the company and then basically scaled the company from there.
Were you always thinking that you want to get into engineering leadership, or was there more a natural transition? Because again, when we talk about career, a lot of folks think through the lens of putting career plans. Like, well, at a certain level, I'll be senior engineer, and then I'll be staff engineer, and then I'll be whatever distinguished engineer, and so on and so forth. For you, was that more kind of a natural transition, or was it planned?
I think it was a natural transition. So when I joined the UFC, I thought, what, I would just be an engineer. Now I've had some people that have, I've had some friends who have been engineers for much longer that have moved to sort of a management role. And also people, you read this online, people say, after a couple of years, you don't feel like, writing code anymore. You want to manage people for different reasons. So I thought that might happen, but I never really planned for it. My mind, it was just, let's just go, let's see what happens. And so I wasn't planning that I would start managing people. And actually, to be frank, I did some management. I was a team lead just before I left the UFC. So I did some management there, but I think it wasn't. I didn't have a timeline like, okay, I'm going to code hard for 5 years or 10 years, and then I'm going to switch to maybe engineering manager. That's a typical path, and then go to a different role. Not really. I was just sort of doing my thing, writing code, just trying to figure out life. And I think that just happened. That was a natural progression.
Again, looking back at this, were there any pivotal decisions or pivotal skills that you feel like you developed through your work that helped you land that CTO role, that helped you become a CTO? Because I'm sure that your friend, when they brought you in, they would even know it's like, okay, well, Taiwo is the person that knows how to do this stuff. Like, they're not just going to bring a random person. It's like, well, hopefully you learn how to be a CTO, right? It's like more like you have the skill set to help the company grow. What were those pivotal decisions or skill sets that helped you kind of grow into this position?
So I think there were two. I'm trying to. I'm trying to see if I can remember all the maybe moments, but there are two that comes to my mind right now. So the first is when I worked at the nonprofit. I had a boss then, Matt, just an awesome dude, and he mentored me. This wasn't a job for him or for me anyway. It wasn't. He didn't look at it as just one of the guys here. I have to mentor. It's like, hey, Taiwo, you need to learn this stuff. I want to help you. And so we would go into the office, and it would take me to the one of the rooms, and on the whiteboard, let me explain some computing, um, you know, some computing concept to you. So he really spent time helping me to understand fundamentals. So that, I think, that was an inflection point for me in my career. But then at the UFC, so a bit of a longer story about the UFC. I joined a company called Fight Metrics. They were the exclusive stats provider for the UFC. Exclusive. So any stats, any pretty much up to today, any stats anywhere in the world, unless that is official, came from that company. Right. So I joined that company, and then 3 years in, we got acquired by the UFC, and then we all became UFC staff. But when I joined, I was the third engineer at the time. So I had two bosses, and then I had two other developer colleagues. So there were just five people. Well, one more person actually who was doing stats. So there were six of us at the company. And so because there were just three engineers, it felt like a startup. And so all what would happen was my boss would have a meeting. He would tell me what the requirements were, and basically you just when you've written the code, deployed, tested, and it's you have a URL to the app, send it to me. So I spend a lot of time building applications from the ground up, all the way to provisioning Rackspace servers, Ansible script, all of that stuff. And we had a team of three people. So I learned a lot while I was working for the company that eventually got acquired by the UFC. And in those 4 to 5 year period, I mean, I was doing things on the side also that helped me grow. But I learned a lot at the UFC just because of the size of the company. This wasn't one guy in a mix of 10,000 people. No, this is Taiwo. Your code is going to go live in 2 weeks, and there might be 10,000 fans using it, and I'm just going to tell you the requirements, and you need to send me a link when it's ready. So that, I think, helped me grow significantly. And so when I joined Distrobird, it wasn't an issue to have taken on that challenge at that point.
So it's that combination of, I want to call it like a higher pressure environment, and then a forcing function to go and figure things out, where you don't really have somebody to hold your hand and say, like, here's where you go and change this thing. It's more like, we trust you. You have 2 weeks, go figure this out.
Absolutely. That was the grind. That was how it was. So it was great. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot in a short amount of time. And again, like I said, the folks I worked with were just great people. And when I left, it was difficult. It was very difficult. Yeah.
It's interesting because that's a combination of skills that probably goes back to your kind of entrepreneurial aspirations that you talked about at the beginning of this show. And that is, you are not waiting for instructions. You're not waiting for somebody to go and guide you, because I have seen the two different classes of engineers that exist out there, like those that have higher agency, that will go and say, I will go figure out the optimal solution for this, and I can come up with good ideas around this. I can come up with a different implementation than what maybe they expected to make the code more performant. And then there's the other class of engineers, which is, I'm an instruction follower. Like, yeah, like, oh, you want me to build it this way? Okay, I'll go build it this way. Oh, you want me to go fix this bug? I'll go fix this bug. And I feel like this category of the higher agency people has significantly higher potential, and in terms of not being disrupted by a lot of the things that are happening, including like AI and all these things that we see right now. It's like that higher agency adds the bit of a bulletproof kind of bubble around your career.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think if you're going to go work as a developer, you have to be asking questions. You have to be evolving and learning. You have to. Yeah, there will be requirements, instructions, yes, but you have to go beyond that. When I've hired people in my career, and it's the same thing. I've mentored a lot of engineers. It's the same thing. You need to be inquisitive. You need to ask questions. Even if I say you should do something a certain way, I might be wrong. I could completely be saying, or be giving you just a wrong solution. So it's always good as a developer, as an engineer, to ask questions. I think that's how the world has gotten here. People asking questions. And so if you just expect, to be given every single thing you need to do, just this, what's my to-do list today? Here, all right, give me a couple of hours, I'll get this knocked out. I don't think you're going to grow much. You need to be able to ask questions. So for me, I think it's a no-brainer. That's just, as a person, you need to ask questions, you need to grow, you need to learn things. And it requires making a push and sometimes going to find those answers yourself.
You alluded to the fact that you had a mentor, and I want to zero in a little bit more on that. And that, what's the value of mentorship in your eyes? Like, where do you see the mentor helping you push yourself further?
So mentorship is big. I mean, I don't know if I can even describe just how huge it is for me. And in different categories of just different things I do in life, I always try to find mentors to help me with that. In my faith, I have mentors. In my career, I've had mentors over the years. So when I was at a nonprofit, Matt was my mentor. When I joined the UFC, I had the team lead for the engineering team, who was also my mentor. And so for me, mentors, I said earlier that time is of the essence. I don't have time to waste. I like to be very exact and very precise when I do things. And what mentors can do for you is basically it's a hack to help you save time, right? So mentors that have done the same thing, and they've made mistakes, they've recovered from those mistakes. You can go learn from them and just say, look, just tell me, what am I supposed to do here, and that mentor can say, hey, you know what, do this, or Taiwo, if you're trying to be a better developer, I think you should study this more, or so mentorship is so big for me because you can save a ton of time by just following some things that other people have done or learning from their mistakes. And you still have work to do, don't get me wrong, but you can take their knowledge, their wisdom, add it to yours, and save yourself a ton of time. Time is really the resource we're running against. Time is, you can't create it or make it. It's finite. And so if I can save time by using a mentor or someone who's done the same thing, and then yeah, absolutely, why not? So it's very huge for me. At home, I'm always talking about getting mentors and people getting advice. And yeah, it's huge. It saves you time. Just put it that way.
How do you find a mentor? Because that's the crux of the problem here. Is like the conceptually it sounds good. Sure, we all want a mentor,
Right.
but you can't be reaching out to people on LinkedIn randomly and be like, "Hey, do you want to be my mentor? Like, let's set up a weekly 101." Like that doesn't quite work.
I mean, you might have to do that actually. You might have, you might,
Really?
because yeah,
Okay.
because right now everything is mostly remote. I don't think people are going back to work, but let's think about 3-4 years ago, everything was remote. You would have to just email people or just LinkedIn them and just tell them, look, can you be my mentor? Or this is what I'm trying to do, and I think some mentorship might help. Most people probably say no and just not even respond. But I think you have to keep going. So how do you find mentors? So for me, I think I've been fortunate enough to find mentors in my path. So I got a job at a nonprofit. Great, Matt was a great person, and he was willing to mentor me. And then I joined the UFC, and my team lead was also willing to mentor me. So I've had people sort of in my path that have chosen to mentor me. But there were some when we joined Distrobird, actually, when I joined Distrobird, sorry, in 2018. I remember myself and my colleague, we reached out to, I don't remember his name now, but we reached out to someone in San Francisco to say, hey, we're trying to figure out this application. We're trying to, expand the platform. We're doing okay, but we're trying to expand the platform. And can you mentor us? And he did. He did for about maybe 6 months, and things sort of kind of fell apart. And that's fine. That's okay. But in some cases, we had to just we had to reach out to people. We had to go visit people and say, hey, can you be our mentor? Here's what we're trying to do. It's better if it's more organic. That's true. It tends to be more sticky and it tends to last longer if it's more organic. But if you can find someone easily, but you know where they are on LinkedIn, I would say yes, reach out to them. If there are events now that you can go to, meetup. I don't know if meetup events still happen as much, but if there are meetup events, go there, talk to people, be very proactive about it. Yeah. So that, yeah, you have the responsibility lies with the person, with the mentee, the person trying to get mentorship. So mentors are not going to fall in just going to fall in like that. You have to go, and if they say no the first time, give it a break. 3 months, go back again. Just don't give up, right? So you need help, and so it's your responsibility to push and say, look, I need help, until maybe they say, look, don't contact me again. Then you back off. But yeah, I think, again, like I said, I'm about, let's go get it, let's get it done. So if I need to get a mentor, I would fly. I mean, we've flown to San Francisco before to find mentors. Like, hey, can you guys mentor us? And so, okay, sure. So I think organic or referrals are better, but if not, just go direct, and that's okay too.
You basically do what needs to be done,
Absolutely.
which leads me to the next question, which is how do you make the most out of a mentor mentee relationship? Because it's one thing to find a mentor, it's a whole nother story to derive value from that interaction. How do you do that?
So I think at least for yourself, knowing being clear on what you need from the mentor, right? Being very clear. So two things, I guess. Apart from just trying to get value out of the mentor, I like to just I would spend time knowing that person. Again, all my mentors are still my friends. We still WhatsApp, and I still had dinner with Matt over Christmas, right? So I built a close personal relationship with them. So it's not just, I know that you have something I can get, I just want to take it and head out. So I built a personal relationship with them. They understand some of my vision, what I'm trying to do. They understand who I am, and I get to meet them, meet their family in some cases. So that's that. But on the other end, you need to define clearly what you need from them. If you have to have a calendar appointment every week or every other week, where it's like, okay, we're going to sit for 1 hour, and here are the issues I have. Here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build a business. I'm trying to um, go to college or go to grad school. These are things I need, and let's work on those things. So you have to define the relationship. And especially if it's organic, if it's an organic relationship, it might be, you could still get value without having very rigid structure. But if it's someone you just happen to meet or you happen to talk to, and you guys haven't built that rapport, you need to have more structure around it, because they're not thinking about you. They're just not thinking about you. Many of the mentors I've had, I know they're thinking about me. Okay, how can I help Taiwo? Sometimes they're the ones pushing and say, Taiwo, I think you need to do this, right? But for other people, I have to be the one sending messages to them saying, hey, can we connect next week? Can we connect, the other, in a month, and things like that. So try to develop a personal relationship with your mentors, but on the other hand, have a structure around how you can derive value. So if it's meetings, then do that. Get that on the calendar. Get that going regularly. That's what's worked for me over the last couple of years.
Going back to your career a bit. So, technologists, especially those that get into the tracks of management and kind of the higher level positions, will face a fork eventually in the road where do I want to continue writing more code or do I want to get more into leadership? And that seems a bit of a, I want to say, like ambiguous transition, because on the surface it seems like if I stop writing code, I over time become less technical because like I'm not as aware of the things that are happening. I'm not, hands on the keyboard being able to write the code and test it and see how it actually works behind the scenes. How was the transition for you? How did you rationalize kind of the switch of say, okay, it's good for me to step back a bit from coding and become more of a leader, a C-suite leader in this case?
So it's true, yes. I right now I do have some of that concerns about not writing. I still write code, right? And when I joined Distrobird initially, I was maybe in 70-80% technical and maybe 20% management. And there were two developers in Nepal that I still had to manage, but I spent a ton of time in just writing in what's the word, in writing code. Yeah. So, but then over time, as the company sort of grew, I found that I was writing less and less code. But I took it as just, it's just what it is. It's what it's just the nature of it that we have to grow the team, and there are more people. There are 5, 6 engineers now. I have to manage all these people. I literally don't have enough time to manage them, do code reviews, do talk about requirements, and still write code. It's just not possible. And so I come to accept it. Every now and then, one of the things I do is I still try to stay, even if I don't write code as much, but I try to stay up with the news. I'm on TechCrunch, I'm on Hacker News, just trying to stay up on what's going on and reading up documentation. Just to say, oh, okay, this is some new technology, interesting. This is pretty cool. Sometimes I'll actually go take a course. So I took a React course. I think at some point, so look, I need to understand how this works. We might use this at Distrobird. Let me go take a React course anyway. And so for me, I've just sort of accepted that that's the path that would happen. But I still want to be able to provide technical guidance to the people I work with. And so I would still go take courses, read up on documentation, read up on things. And every now and then I would actually create time to write code. Okay, I don't want to be too far away from this. So hey guys, I can't do code reviews as much. We're gonna slow down on code reviews. I'm gonna go into we're using Asana, and I'm gonna pick out tasks and I'm gonna work on those things just so I can stay in the fray. So that's sort of that's my balance. But I think eventually that my coding probably will go down to maybe 10-20%, and I've just come to accept it. I think for me personally, I've just come to accept that that's what's going to happen. I have kids now, and so sometimes you just don't have the same drive to sit down and spend hours writing code, reading documentation, trying to figure things out. So it just happens, and I'm okay. I'm totally okay with that.
Was it hard to kind of let go of the reins? Because instinctually, again, it's very easy if you are a leader and you have your team that sometimes they'll struggle with certain tasks. Like, oh, we can't figure out how to set up this deployment pipeline, or we can't figure out how this particular nasty bug in their renderer works. Like, it's easy kind of just say like, you know what, like I'll jump in, let me clone the repo, I'll help you. But that also would kind of defeat the point of like, well, you're a CTO, you can jump in and help with every single thing that pops up like that. How is it for you to just kind of say let go and say like the team will figure this out?
It depends. If it's a time critical issue, especially something I'm quite familiar with, then I will jump in. I might say, okay, let's jump in together. It might be pair programming. Let's jump in together and figure this out, because I want to make sure you learn and then you can apply this the next time. If it's absolutely like critical, like the house is burning down, and I just need to save the company now. This is not about mentorship. So I will jump in. I've done that before. I will jump in and say, okay, what do I need to look at? What's going on? Let's figure this out. I mean, of course, I will. If someone is working on it, I'll have them be on the call, but I'll take a lead on it. If it's not super critical, if it's like it's a bug, but it's not a big issue, then I just understand I have to delegate. I have to let that person go work on it, and that's okay. I think I'm comfortable to different levels. There are engineers on the team that are maybe even better than I am, honestly. And so I might look at things with them just just to have a second opinion, but I'm super comfortable just letting them go figure it out. And then there are engineers that I feel like might still be coming up. Okay, I need to jump in and help them, or just so in most cases for me, it's about jumping in and doing it together so that they can be mentored and they can learn. I would only jump in and like save the day in quotes if it's super critical. A customer is sending an email, they're calling my phone, and they're saying, "Look, we're losing money." Yes, and at that point, I know I'm getting calls too. So okay, I need to jump into this and figure it out. So I think for me, it's just accepting it. It took a while for me to get there, but eventually, yes, I had other things to do. I almost had no choice. Like I just can't get in now to look at this bug because I have a meeting with a customer or with a potential client, and so you just have to go deal with this. So yeah,
Piggybacking off of that question a little bit, and that is, to be a good leader, you need to develop skills clearly that go beyond the technical. That's just not just about code and architecture, but also how do you work with customers? How do you develop a good sense for what the kind of architectural direction should go in generally at a higher level? What are those skills that you feel like you having them has helped you become a better CTO that are not your typical kind of technical, like, like know how distributed systems work and stuff like that?
the biggest one is just managing people, and part of the reason I think I do well managing people is just showing empathy. I think I'm pretty good at that. And when I was in college, I led several organizations there, and I had to work with people, and just you had to listen to people, right? And so I think the most critical skill is CTO needs, because a lot of CTO come from technical backgrounds. So you're very good at coding, and that's great, but you're not very good at managing people. And so people don't want to work for you. People don't want to work here, and it's just working, knowing how to manage people. And for me, I think the biggest thing is maybe to wrap it up in one word, it would be empathy. You're likely working with people that are growing in their career. You're probably further along than they are. And so, yes, the bug that took you a minute to fix, it's going to take them an hour. And not being frustrated about that, knowing that, you know what, that's okay. I was there. Again, I still remember when my boss, Matt, would take me into the office and say, Taiwo, here's how to instantiate a class. I was like, oh, wow. I didn't know that. So you have to sort of remember where you came from, and that keeps you humble, and it helps you understand, okay, I get the problem. Here's how you can fix it. So empathy, I think, is one of the greatest skill or attribute really a leader in any role should have towards the people. So I get, so beyond just what are you guys doing today and that's it, I actually want to know people a bit more personally. I think the company was sort of at a size where I can still know people personally, and people can, when some of my team members were getting married, I was invited to come. If I was invited to come speak at the wedding, I was like, nah, I'm not speaking at the wedding. Because I spend time to actually learn and just understand. We're all humans. What's your story? How did you get here? And what's your plan? What beyond Distrobird, what do you intend to do after that? So when people see that, they appreciate that you're invested in them beyond just get these things done, let's move on, we need to ship. And so that's helped me. And so again, like I said, empathy is, I think, a big word, and it's a big thing you need to have as a leader. It makes people feel like you really want to know them, you want the best for them, beyond just, hey, get this code done, and that's it, I'm paying you, so just get it done. So that's my philosophy anyway, and some people might disagree, but I think it's worked very, very well for me.
I think it's a very good philosophy, and I'm spotting that second thing that is kind of interwoven with the things that you're talking about, and that is that curiosity that you alluded to very early in the show, and then the combination with the ability to learn, and kind of that approach to, I want to learn how this actually works, and I want to learn how people operate, what motivates them. I think that's super important. And you were talking about even like spending time learning about that new React feature or anything else, like taking a React course. How has your approach to learning changed as you became a leader?
Early on in my career, I was focused mostly on just technical skills, just learning how to code, learning all the newest technologies, trying to understand what those things were. I think over time, I've learned more to, again, focus on learning about people, learning about management. I still I think I'm still inquisitive. It's just the things I learn are different, very, very different. I'm learning about how do you make a business successful? How do we scale? Not when I mean scale, not scale in terms of technology. Like how does a business scale? So, so it's. I think that's where my learning is shifting. It's shifting into how do you build a successful company, right? Sure, I'm not the CEO. I'm not the head of finance and things like that. But even as a developer or as the head of a development team, yeah, what we do contributes to the success of the company. But I also want to learn what do we need to do as a company overall to be successful. So I think that is that's where my focus has shifted to more now, and less on technical things. I mean, again, I still read blog posts. I'm still subscribed to a bunch of Medium blogs where that talk about technical things. But at this point in my career and life, how do we build a successful company? How do we get there? And so that's where I've been focused on more. And again, the guys I work with right now, I think I'm pretty comfortable with them, and so there's not much learn. I'm still involved in their life and things like that, but there's not much learning about them that needs to happen. It's just, guys, we've built software. Let's figure out how we can make this company successful. So I think that's really my focus at this point.
Also, building on that is you have to know what to learn. You have to kind of understand what provides you the highest leverage for what you're doing right now. And this is something that you've alluded to yourself when you talked about the value of time. The more your career grows and the more your responsibilities evolve, the more critical it is that the time is used on the right things. How do you determine when you try to structure your learning or what you need to figure out, for example, around the business, around how the business operates, what will provide you the most leverage that you invest your time learning and is actually going to pay off and give you dividends rather than something that you're going to be like, okay, great. And now what do I do with this knowledge?
Interesting. That's a good question. So for me, I think it's I talked about mentorship. Now, it's not every mentor. It's not every, how do I put this? It's not everyone that you learn from that will be your mentor, right? I can have, it's not possible for me to have 20 mentors. I think that might be too many. But there are people that, I see in the industry that, have been successful, and people who have gone on to do really interesting things. And can I learn from them? And so you will find me I'm looking for certain CTOs, certain, not just CTOs, certain founders and CEOs, or salespeople or head of sales that have done really incredible things that we hear about, read about, and try to understand their journey, try to learn from them and say, okay, when you were building, so let's say you're a CTO, so you came in, you're managing a team of 5 people and you guys scaled. How did you, I'll give an interesting one. Rippling is a company that I respect a lot. And some people might have different views of the CEO, but I respect what they've done with the multi-product approach. And one of the things they said was, at a certain point, they essentially had to break up. They had to create different teams that were focused on just a single product, right? You can't, in the initial phase, I assume one person could probably work across 3 products or 10 products, no problem. But as the company was scaling, they had to break it into individual teams, and then eventually figure out how to have cross function task. So I was learning about that. So for me, it's going out, sometimes watching podcasts and listening to people that have basically gone ahead and say, okay, what did they do right that we can adopt and we can learn from? They are not my mentor. I probably will never meet them. I may never see their face again beyond that podcast, but I've learned from their experience, and I can take that from there. So it's finding the right people. LinkedIn, go on the blogs, go on the Google search, finding the right people that have done things that you're trying to do, and learning from those people. If they can become your mentor, even better. But if not, just find every single book they've written and go read that book.
And also as a CTO, you have to live in a very, I want to say, like an ambiguous environment where oftentimes like you don't have complete information to make decisions. And there's no amount of kind of learning that can necessarily help you there because the information you might be looking for might not even exist.
True. Yeah.
How do you tackle that? How do you tackle the approach of like, how do you thrive in an environment where that ambiguity is essentially persistent? It never goes away.
So I think you have to be okay with experimenting. I think you have to be okay with that. There again, like you said, there's just some information that is yet there's not you can find. Even if you read books on or read blogs on other people that have been successful, and they said, oh, we did this and did that and we got this X result, it might not work for you. That's the truth. It just might not work. But you have to be okay with failing, and you have to be okay with experimenting. You sort of have to step out there and just reach out and say, okay, you know what? I don't have any precedence here. So, but I believe, if I do these things, I might get the result I'm looking for. And then you go out and you experiment. And if it doesn't work, you go back and start again. It's part of the journey. If you're not willing to experiment and take that leap of faith really on some issues, then yeah, the entrepreneurial journey will be very frustrating. It's still frustrating anyway, but it will be even more frustrating. It's like, you know what? No, this is not for me. I don't want to do this. So you can't have all the answers. Some of the answers has to be learned. You have to experience it, and so you have to be okay with taking some of those chances and seeing. But don't spend too much time. Don't if you experiment and you're not getting the results, it might be time for you to pivot or make a change.
You have to kind of tame down that perfectionist. I want to say like that lives in kind of all of us. Where it's like, well, we have to wait until it's perfect. We have to wait until it's complete. Sometimes it's okay to ship. Like that's the important thing.
Yeah.
If you look back now and at your transition from being an individual contributor to a CTO, what was the most challenging aspect of that jump?
I think that transition of trying to do both, because I still code again, but there was, like we talked about earlier, there was a point where I was struggling with, no, I need to still know how to code, and trying to do code reviews, trying to be in sales meetings or customer success meetings, and trying to code was very difficult. And I think maybe there was a point where I sort of had to do both. I didn't have a choice, right? But I think I held on for much longer. It's like, no, I'm still going to give me an entire feature. I will build the entire thing out. I don't want to fix just bugs. I want to build entire, new lines of products. So just tell me what to do. And so I think trying to hold on to that was very difficult. And I think eventually it was just clear you can't do it. You're not going to be good at either one if you try to do both. And so if there are times where I just don't have as much work to do, like I just don't have as much meetings or code reviews, yeah, I might say, okay, let's work on some bug fixes and things like that. But I just don't. Again, I think that transition was difficult because I think every developer that loves coding wants to keep coding, and if you're being forced to shift, you're going to fight and struggle with it. And you're going to say, no, I think I can do, I think I'm going to be the guy that's different. I will do both. And you find out that, well, you really can't. It's difficult to do. And then eventually transition. I love, talking to people. I love meeting people. I love mentoring people. I actually taught at the bootcamp for 2 years. And so being that focusing more on mentoring I like that. It's just I also love coding. So can I do both? And so it's not I had no issues moving, transitioning really. I had no issues saying, oh, this is gonna be all you're gonna do now. But it's like, okay, can I do both? And I think, oh, I think I can do both. But it's like, oh no, you really can't do both. You need to focus on one and be very good at it. And so I think that transition, just holding on a bit longer and just admitting to yourself that, look, you can't write 80% of the code anymore. You need to go do like 20 or 30% of the code. That was difficult.
And the value of focusing, and this is what
Yeah.
you just mentioned.
Yeah.
That is like you have to know to focus on the right things and what has the higher ROI, the return on investment for what you're doing. Because otherwise, like there's always going to be a million things to do. Like
There's always stuff
bugs
to do.
to fix, features to build, products to explore. Why not?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It has been a wonderful conversation, Taiwo. Thank you for sharing your insights. But now there's our trademark question that I ask of all the guests, and that is, if you would think for somebody that's listening to the show and that wants to look at you as a role model and say, wow, what Taiwo did is great. I want to follow in his footsteps. What would be one unconventional advice that you'd give this listener based on your wealth of experience?
I don't know if it's unconventional. It's advice anyway. um, and I guess it would be two. Let's make that two. It would be two things. And we've talked through that, earlier. So I think number one is just find a mentor. It's going to save you a ton of time. It's mentors, good mentors anyway, will help you get to your destination faster. Good mentors will help you share the burden of, doing what you're trying to do. Find a mentor, reach out to people directly if necessary. If you can get someone to refer them, do that. I think the second thing really is it's not something specific. I would just say, again, like I said, time is of the essence. you need to start today. If your goal was to make, you want to start a business, you want to learn a new skill, there's no time better than just doing it right now and starting today. You're just we all have we have different resources. You know, people more wealthy than other people, but we all have 24 hours. We'll have the same time, and our ability to use time, you know, prudently, I think, allows us to achieve our goals. So you can't wait. You know, doing it next year, doing it in 2 years time, it's not going to be any better. So it's better you start now and learn from perhaps your failures, and you know, and change and become more successful. So find a mentor and start now. That's, I think that would be my advice. I don't know if it's unconventional, but that's my advice anyway.
It is unconventional, and it is wonderful advice that I think everybody should follow. Taiwo, thank you again. For folks that want to learn more about the work that you're doing, your adventures, where should they go? Where can they, when they go to learn more?
So I'm not very present online. So you can, of course, you can add me on LinkedIn, you know, Taiwo Oyeniyi. You can find me there. I'm actually starting a YouTube channel soon. I'm growing a garden essentially, and
Awesome. That is amazing.
uh, it's called my channel is called Techie Farmer. So TECHIE Techie Farmer. And on YouTube, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok. And I have no videos yet posted. I've been recording videos. Like, you know, I have experts in my home, so I've been recording videos. And in next month or so, I should start posting. And that would really just document my journey of being a farmer and growing a garden. But yeah, that's how to find me online anyway.
So fun. And we're going to include the links to all of them in the show notes. So for folks, make sure to check out, subscribe. I know I'll be subscribing to you when we're done recording this. Taiwo, thank you so much for sharing the wealth of your insights. This is great.
Thank you so much, Dan.